Hey, my name's Daniel Carter. I'm 28 years old and I live in a quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. I've been teaching art at Jefferson High School for the past 4 years. It's not the most exciting job in the world, dealing with teenagers who sometimes care more about their phones than their sketchbooks. But I like it. There's something satisfying about watching a kid discover they can create something from nothing. My life is pretty straightforward otherwise. I rent a small apartment on the east side, with just enough space for my easel and a stack of canvases. I don't go out much, not since my last relationship ended about a year ago. It wasn't dramatic, we just drifted apart. These days I fill my weekends with simple routines like jogging along the Willamette River or experimenting with new coffee blends at home. One of my favorite habits is heading to the Corner Bean every Saturday morning. It's this cozy little coffee shop tucked away in the Alberta Arts District, not far from my place. The place has that classic Portland vibe. Exposed brick walls, mismatched wooden tables, and a chalkboard menu that changes with the seasons. They roast their own beans, and the smell alone is enough to pull you in from the street. It's usually busy, especially on sunny days after our endless rainy winters, but I always manage to snag a spot by the window. It's my time to unwind, sip a black coffee, and doodle in my sketchbook. Ideas for class projects, random portraits of strangers, whatever comes to mind. That particular Saturday started out like any other. The sun was finally breaking through after a week of gray skies, and the air had that fresh, crisp feel that makes you forget how miserable February can be. I got to the shop around 9 a.m., ordered my usual Americano, and settled into my favorite table near the window. The light was perfect for sketching, streaming in and casting soft shadows across the room. I pulled out my notebook and started roughing out some ideas for a unit on urban landscapes. Maybe something inspired by the St. John's Bridge, with its Gothic towers rising over the river. The shop was packed, more than usual. Tourists snapping photos of the latte art, a couple on what looked like a first date, a group of college kids huddled over laptops, debating something animatedly. The hum of conversation mixed with the whir of the espresso machine, creating that comforting background noise I loved. I was lost in my drawing when I noticed her enter. She was in her early 30s, I guessed, with blonde hair tied back in a simple ponytail that let a few strands frame her face. She wore a light jacket over a plain t-shirt and jeans, nothing flashy, but there was a quiet grace to how she moved. What caught my eye, though, was the way she navigated the crowded space, with a crutch under one arm and what looked like a prosthetic leg on her left side. It was sleek, metallic, partially hidden by her pant leg, but obvious enough if you were paying attention. She scanned the room, her expression neutral but determined, like she was used to handling things on her own. The place was full, no empty tables in sight. I watched as she approached a couple near the counter, the ones who seemed deep in conversation. She leaned in politely and asked something. I couldn't hear the words, but their body language said it all. They glanced at each other, shook their heads apologetically, and she nodded, stepping back with a tight smile. Next, she tried a man at a corner table, buried in his laptop, headphones on. He looked up, removed one earbud, listened, then shrugged and pointed vaguely at his screen, as if to say he needed the space. She thanked him anyway and moved on. Then came the group of students, 4 or 5 of them, laughing over notes and half-empty mugs. She asked, and they exchanged awkward looks before one mumbled something about waiting for more friends. Again, rejection, polite but firm. I could see the disappointment flickering in her eyes, a subtle slump in her shoulders as she turned away. She wasn't making a scene, but there was a quiet vulnerability there that tugged at me. She paused for a moment, gripping her crutch a little tighter, scanning the room one last time. Our eyes met briefly across the shop, and I felt a pang, something like empathy mixed with that nagging voice in my head saying, "Don't just sit there." But before I could decide what to do, she started heading toward the door like she might give up and leave. Then she changed course. She walked straight to my table, her steps measured and deliberate. Up close, I noticed her eyes were a soft hazel, and there was a faint scar along her jawline, barely visible. She stopped a respectful distance away and spoke, her voice gentle but steady. "Excuse me, I know this is a little weird, but could I share your table? The place is so crowded today, and I really need to be here right now." I blinked, caught off guard, but only for a second. I stood up quickly, pulling out the chair across from me. "Of course, please, have a seat." Relief washed over her face, and she eased herself down, setting her crutch against the wall. "Thank you so much," she said, exhaling as if she'd been holding her breath. "I'm Emma Walsh." "Daniel Carter," I replied, sitting back down. "No problem at all. What can I get you? My treat. Consider it a welcome to the table." She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Just a latte, if that's okay, with almond milk." I nodded and headed to the counter, weaving through the crowd. As I waited for her drink, I glanced back at the table. She was looking out the window, her expression distant, like her mind was somewhere else. When I returned with the latte and a couple of pastries, I'd grabbed an extra croissant just in case. She thanked me again. We started with small talk. The weather, how Portland's rain made sunny days like this feel like a holiday. She mentioned she was a freelance graphic designer working from home mostly, and I told her about my teaching gig, how I was always hunting for inspiration in places like this. The conversation flowed easier than I expected. Emma had a dry sense of humor, poking fun at the overpriced artisanal beans, and she asked about my sketches without prying too much. But beneath it all, I sensed a sadness, like she was carrying something heavy. After about 15 minutes, as she stirred her latte, she said quietly, "You know, today is my birthday." I looked up, surprised. "Really? Happy birthday. That's worth celebrating. Want me to ask the barista for a candle or something?" She laughed softly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks, but no need. This is actually the first time I've come back here for my birthday." There was a weight to her words, an unspoken story hanging in the air. I didn't push, just nodded. "Well, I'm glad you're here. Birthdays shouldn't be spent alone." She met my gaze, and for a moment, her guard slipped. Just a flicker of vulnerability. "Yeah," she whispered. "They shouldn't." She looked down at her latte, tracing the rim of the cup with her finger, as if deciding whether to say more. I didn't push, I just waited, sensing that whatever was behind her words needed space to come out. After a long pause, she glanced up at me, her hazel eyes searching mine for something. Maybe judgment, maybe pity. But I kept my expression open, neutral, the way I do with my students when they're sharing a personal story through their art. "You probably think I'm being dramatic," she said softly, her voice barely above the chatter around us. "Coming back here for a birthday. But this place, it was our spot. My family's, I mean. Every Saturday morning, we'd pile in here. My dad, mom, little sister, and me. It was our ritual. Pancakes for Lily, black coffee for Dad, lattes for Mom and me. We'd sit right over there." She nodded toward a booth in the corner, "and just talk about nothing and everything. School, work, silly dreams. It was the one time we all slowed down." I leaned in slightly interested. "Sounds like good memories. What were they like? Your family?" Emma's face softened for a moment, a real smile breaking through. "Dad was a firefighter, tough as nails, but the softest heart. He'd tell these ridiculous stories from his shifts, making us laugh until our sides hurt. Mom was a pediatric nurse, always bringing home little toys from the hospital for Lily. And my sister, God, Lily was 10, full of energy. She'd draw on the napkins, stick figures of us as superheroes. We weren't rich, lived in an old apartment building downtown, but those mornings made us feel like we had everything." Her voice trailed off and she took a sip of her drink, staring out the window at the passing cars. I could tell there was more, a shadow lurking behind the warmth. "That sounds perfect," I said gently. "What changed?" She set her cup down, her hands trembling just a little. 2 years ago, almost to the day, she paused, gathering herself, and I didn't interrupt. Our building had issues, leaky pipes, faulty wiring, but the big one was the gas line. We'd complained for months. The smell would come and go, headaches, dizziness. The landlord kept saying it was fine, just old pipes. One night, I was up late working on a design project. Lily was asleep in the next room, Mom and Dad in theirs. Then, boom. Her voice cracked and she looked away, wiping at her eyes quickly. I felt a knot form in my stomach, sensing where this was headed. The explosion was massive. The whole building came down like it was made of cards. I was buried under rubble, concrete, metal, everything. It was dark, suffocating. I could hear sirens in the distance, people screaming. My leg, it was pinned, crushed. The pain was unreal, but all I could think about was them. I kept calling out for Lily, for my parents, but there was no answer. I reached across the table instinctively, not touching her hand but placing mine nearby, palm up. An offer of comfort without intrusion. She glanced at it, then continued, her words coming faster now, like a dam breaking. Rescue teams found me after 6 hours. They had to cut through debris to pull me out. When I woke up in the hospital, my leg was gone, amputated below the knee. But that wasn't the worst part. The doctor sat me down, told me Dad had tried to get everyone out. He was helping neighbors when the second collapse hit. Mom was holding Lily. They didn't make it. None of them did. Tears streamed down her face now, silent but steady. The shop's noise faded around us. It felt like we were in our own bubble. I didn't know what to say. Words seemed inadequate. Emma, I'm so sorry. That's unimaginable. She nodded, dabbing at her cheeks with a napkin. The landlord got sued, but it didn't bring them back. I moved to Vancouver after that, stayed with distant relatives, threw myself into freelance work, designs for logos, websites, anything to keep busy. But I shut everyone out. The prosthetic, it's functional, but every time I look at it, I remember. I avoided places like this, reminders of what I lost. Today, though, it's my birthday. I turned 32 and I needed to feel close to them again. Sitting here, even if it's alone. You're not alone today, I said quietly, meaning it. Not if you don't want to be. She met my eyes and something shifted, a small crack in her armor. Thank you, Daniel, really. Most people, they don't know what to say. Or they pity me. You just listened. We sat there for a while longer, the conversation shifting to lighter things. My art classes, her latest project for a local brewery's branding. But the weight of her story lingered, making the air between us feel charged, real. As the crowd thinned out, she checked her watch. I should go, but this helped. More than you know. Anytime, I replied. We exchanged numbers, nothing more than a casual, in case you want to grab coffee again. She stood, steadying herself on her crutch, and gave me one last smile before heading out. I watched her go, the sun catching her hair as she crossed the street. Something in me had shifted too. That morning, I'd come for solitude. Instead, I'd found a connection I hadn't been looking for. After that first morning at the corner bean, I didn't expect much. We exchanged numbers as she left, but it felt like one of those polite gestures you make with someone you'll probably never see again. I went home that day replaying her story in my head. The explosion, the loss, the quiet strength she carried despite it all. It stuck with me, making my own problems feel small. That night, I sketched a quick portrait of her from memory, just her profile against the window light. It wasn't perfect, but it captured something real. A couple of days later, my phone buzzed with a text. Hey, Daniel. It's Emma from the coffee shop. Just wanted to say thanks again for listening. Hope your week's going well. Simple, no pressure. I replied right away, no problem at all. Glad you reached out. How's the rest of your birthday week treating you? From there, it started slow. Casual messages about the rain starting up again, or me sharing a funny story from class about a kid who turned in a sculpture made entirely of recycled soda cans. She sent back a photo of a design she was working on, a logo for a local bookstore, asking for my thoughts as an art guy. Before long, the texts turned into plans. I suggested we meet up again at the shop the following Saturday, and to my surprise, she agreed. When she walked in, she looked a little brighter, her crutch less like a burden and more like an extension of her steady gait. We grabbed our drinks, Americano for me, latte for her, and talked for hours. She opened up about her freelance work, how designing from home gave her flexibility but also isolated her sometimes. I shared more about teaching, the highs of seeing a student's breakthrough and the lows of grading endless assignments. It felt easy, natural, like we'd skipped the awkward getting-to-know-you phase. Over the next few weeks, our hangouts expanded beyond the coffee shop. I invited her to Washington Park one afternoon after school let out. It's this massive green space in the city with rose gardens and winding paths, perfect for a low-key walk. She hesitated at first, mentioning her prosthetic might slow us down, but I brushed it off. No rush. We'll go at whatever pace works. We strolled through the Japanese garden, the air thick with the scent of blooming cherry blossoms. She leaned on her crutch for the steeper parts, but her face lit up when we reached the koi pond. "I haven't done something like this in forever," she admitted, watching the fish glide under the water. I noticed how she tested her limits, pushing a little further each time, and I encouraged her without making a big deal of it. Then there was Powell's Books, the massive bookstore downtown that's basically a Portland landmark. We spent an entire Saturday afternoon wandering the aisles. She gravitated toward graphic novels and design books, while I hunted for art history volumes. We ended up in the cafe upstairs, stacking our finds on the table and trading recommendations. "You'd like this one," she said, sliding over a book on minimalist illustration. "It reminds me of your sketches." I flipped through it, touched that she'd remembered my doodles from our first meeting. That day, she mentioned she was thinking about moving back to Portland permanently. Vancouver felt too far from her roots now. "Maybe it's time to start over here," she said quietly. I offered to help scout apartments if she needed, and she smiled, genuine this time. A month or so later, she made the move. She found a cozy one-bedroom in a building just 2 blocks from mine. Nothing fancy, but with big windows that let in plenty of light for her work. I helped her unpack, carrying boxes up the stairs while she directed traffic. "Careful with that one. It's got my drawing tablet," she warned, laughing when I pretended to juggle it. Once settled, our routines intertwined. Saturday mornings at the Corner Bean became our standing date, but we added new ones. Cooking experiments in my kitchen, her pasta sauce from her mom's recipe beat anything I'd ever made. Movie nights on my couch with indie films she'd pick from streaming services. Quiet stories about loss and redemption that often left us discussing them late into the night. I watched her change, bit by bit. At first, she was guarded about her leg, always wearing long pants and avoiding anything too physical. But as we grew closer, she opened up. One evening, we went for a longer walk along the riverfront. She was using a new prosthetic fitting she'd just gotten adjusted. Sleeker, more comfortable. "It still feels weird sometimes," she confessed, pausing to rest on a bench. "Like a reminder of everything I lost." I sat beside her, not saying much at first. "It's also a reminder of what you survived," I offered eventually. She looked at me, thoughtful, and nodded. From then on, I encouraged her gently, suggesting short hikes in Forest Park or even a beginner's yoga class downtown. She tried, and each small victory made her stand a little taller. Through it all, our friendship deepened. She became the person I texted first with good news, a student winning an art contest, or bad, like a rough day dealing with school bureaucracy. She'd respond with empathy, often sharing her own stories of pushing through tough freelance gigs. We laughed a lot too, her dry wit cutting through my occasional seriousness. But somewhere in those months, my feelings shifted. It wasn't sudden, it built slowly, like layers of paint on a canvas. The way her eyes lit up when she talked about a new design idea or how she'd lean in during our conversations made my heart race. One night, after a movie, we walked back to her place under the streetlights. She slipped her arm through mine for support on an uneven sidewalk, her head briefly resting on my shoulder. In that moment, as the city hummed around us, I realized I was falling in love with her. But I kept it to myself, afraid it might shatter what we'd built. The weeks that followed our growing closeness felt like the calm before something I couldn't quite name. Emma and I had slipped into a rhythm that felt almost too easy. Saturday mornings at the Corner Bean, long walks along the riverfront where she tested her new prosthetic with quiet determination. Evenings spent cooking simple meals in my tiny kitchen while she told me stories about her freelance projects. I never said anything about the way my chest tightened every time she laughed or leaned her head against my shoulder during a movie. I told myself it was enough just to be there for her, to watch her slowly come back to life. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was falling in love with her, and the fear of ruining what we had kept me silent. Then one rainy Thursday evening, everything shifted. I was in my apartment grading a stack of student sketches when my phone rang. The name on the screen made me pause. Sarah, my ex-girlfriend from 2 years ago. We had ended things cleanly when she moved to Seattle for a new job, and we hadn't spoken much since. Curious, I answered. "Hey, Daniel," she said, her voice warm but hesitant. "I'm back in Portland for a couple of weeks. Thought maybe we could grab coffee and catch up? No pressure, just old times." I hesitated, then agreed. It wasn't anything romantic. She had mentioned in passing that she was engaged now, but part of me wanted closure, or at least to see how far we'd both come. We set a time for the following afternoon at a cafe downtown. I didn't think much of it. Emma had come over earlier that evening to help me prep for a new lesson plan. She was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for a quick stir-fry, humming softly to herself the way she sometimes did when she felt at ease. I was at the table scrolling through my phone when Sarah's name popped up again with a confirmation text. Without thinking, I read it out loud to myself under my breath. Emma froze mid-chop. "Sarah?" she asked quietly, not turning around. "Is that someone from before?" I nodded casually, still focused on the screen. "Yeah, my ex. She's in town for work. Just catching up over coffee tomorrow. Nothing big." The room went still. Emma didn't say anything for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was too even, too controlled. "That's nice. I hope it goes well." I looked up, sensing something off, but she had already turned back to the stove, her shoulders a little tighter than before. I let it go, assuming she was just tired. We finished dinner, watched part of a documentary, and she left earlier than usual, saying she had a deadline. I walked her to the door, gave her a quick hug, and told her I'd see her Saturday. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The next few days, everything changed. Emma's replies to my texts grew shorter. When I suggested our usual Saturday coffee, she said she was busy with a big client project. I offered to bring lunch to her place. She politely declined. The walk we had planned along the riverfront was canceled with a simple, "maybe next week." I called once and she let it go to voicemail. When I finally got her on the phone, her voice was distant, almost professional. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I've just got a lot going on right now. Maybe we should take a little break from hanging out so much." I didn't understand. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," she said quickly. "You didn't. It's just, I think I've been taking up too much of your time. You should focus on your own life. People from your past, things like that." Sarah. The name hung between us unspoken. I tried to explain that it was nothing, just a friendly catch-up, but Emma cut me off gently. "You don't have to explain. Really, I'm happy for you." After that call, the silence stretched. Days turned into a week, then two. I drove past her building a couple of times, hoping to catch her outside, but her lights were always on and the curtains drawn. The corner bean felt empty without her. My sketchbook stayed closed. Teaching became mechanical. I realized how much space she had quietly filled in my life, and how much I missed her. The rain that night was relentless, the kind that turns Portland streets into rivers. I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, rereading our old messages until I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my jacket and drove straight to her building, the wipers barely keeping up with the downpour. When I knocked on her door, soaked and breathing hard, she opened it slowly, eyes red and puffy. "Daniel?" Her voice was small. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Water dripped from my jacket onto her floor. "This isn't about Sarah. It never was. She's engaged. She just wanted to say hello, that's all." Emma stood there in her oversized sweater, arms wrapped around herself. "It's not just that," she whispered. "I saw the way you looked when you mentioned her. She's whole. She doesn't come with all this." She gestured to her prosthetic leg, visible beneath the hem of her sweater. "I keep thinking I'm holding you back. That one day you'll wake up and realize you deserve someone who isn't broken." The words hit me like a punch. I stepped closer, rain still running down my face. "Emma, listen to me. I don't want whole, I want you. The woman who walked into that coffee shop and asked to share my table even when the whole world felt too heavy. The woman who survived the worst thing imaginable and still finds the strength to smile. I've been falling in love with you for months and I was too scared to say it because I didn't want to lose what we had. But I can't keep pretending anymore." She stared at me, tears slipping down her cheeks. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she stepped forward and buried her face in my chest, her shoulders shaking. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tight as the rain pounded against the windows outside. "I love you too," she whispered against my shirt, her voice breaking. I was so afraid I wasn't enough. "You are more than enough," I said, pressing my lips to the top of her head. "You always were." That night, under the sound of the storm, we finally stopped running from what we both felt. And for the first time since I met her, the future didn't feel uncertain anymore. It felt like ours. After that rainy night, when everything finally came out in the open, our world shifted in the best possible way. We didn't rush into labels or big changes. We just let things unfold naturally like we had from the start. Emma stayed over that evening and we talked until the storm quieted outside. She shared more about her fears, the way the accident had made her question if she could ever let someone in again, if she even deserved happiness after losing so much. I told her about my own hesitations, how teaching art had become my safe space after my breakup, but how meeting her had cracked that shell wide open. By morning, with the sun breaking through the clouds, we both knew this was real and we were in it together. The first few weeks of dating felt like rediscovering the city through her eyes. We went back to our routines, but now with a new layer, holding hands during walks in Washington Park, stealing kisses in the aisles of Powell's when no one was looking. Emma started opening up in ways I hadn't seen before. She dusted off her old sketch pad, the one she'd packed away after the accident, and began drawing again. Simple things at first. The view from her window, a still life of coffee cups. I encouraged her, setting up a small corner in my apartment with extra pencils and paper. "You're talented," I told her one afternoon as she worked on a portrait of the St. John's Bridge. "Don't hide it anymore." She smiled, leaning over to kiss my cheek. "You make me want to try." We tackled bigger steps too. Emma had always been cautious about physical activities, but with me by her side, she pushed her limits. We signed up for a beginner's adaptive hiking group in Forest Park. Short trails at first, where she could test her prosthetic on uneven ground. The first time was tough. She stumbled once, frustration flashing across her face. But I was there, offering a steady arm without making a fuss. "One step at a time," I said, echoing what she'd told me about healing. By the end of the hike, she was beaming, sweat on her brow. As we reached a viewpoint overlooking the city, "I feel alive," she whispered, squeezing my hand. Those moments became our foundation, small victories that built her confidence and deepened what we had. As months passed, our lives intertwined more fully. Emma's lease ended and she moved in with me. Not a dramatic decision, just practical and right. My apartment felt warmer with her things mixed in. Her design books on the shelves, her favorite mug in the cabinet. We created new traditions, like Sunday brunches where we'd recreate her family's pancake recipe, laughing as batter splattered everywhere. She joined me at school events sometimes, chatting with my students about graphic design, inspiring them in ways I couldn't. And I went with her to her support group meetings, sitting quietly in the back while she shared her story. Hearing her speak about the accident now, with strength instead of just pain, made me prouder than I could express. One evening, about 10 months in, we were on the couch watching the rain again, Portland's constant companion. Emma turned to me, her head on my shoulder. "You've given me back pieces of myself I thought were gone forever." I kissed her forehead. "You've done the same for me. I was just going through the motions before you." Exactly a year after that first Saturday at the corner bean, I knew it was time. I'd been carrying the small box in my pocket for weeks, waiting for the right moment. We headed to the shop early, the sun filtering through the same window where we'd met. The place was bustling as always, but our table was free, like fate had saved it. We ordered our drinks, Americano for me, latte for her, and sat there reminiscing. "Can you believe it's been a year?" she asked, stirring her cup. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. "That day you asked to share my table. You changed my life." I slid out of my chair, kneeling in front of her, and opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small diamond that caught the light. "Emma Walsh, will you share my table, my life, for the rest of our days?" Her eyes widened, tears spilling over as she covered her mouth. The shop went quiet around us, people turning to watch. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, laughing through the sobs. "Yes, Daniel, 1,000 times yes." I slipped the ring on her finger and the room erupted in applause. A barista started singing, "Happy Birthday." It wasn't her birthday, but the energy caught on, and soon half the place joined in, turning it into a spontaneous celebration. Strangers congratulated us, someone bought our drinks, and Emma clung to me, her face buried in my neck. I love you, she said, pulling back to look at me. You've given me a future I never thought I'd have. We kept the wedding simple, a small ceremony in Washington Park 6 months later, surrounded by cherry blossoms and a handful of friends. No big guest list, just people who'd become our chosen family. Emma walked down the aisle with her crutch, radiant in a flowing white dress. And when we exchanged vows, she promised to keep building with me one day at a time. I promised to always listen, to always be her safe place. Now, as I sit here reflecting, our life together feels like a canvas we paint every day. Emma's designs have taken off. She's even collaborating with me on school projects. We've talked about starting a family someday, adopting perhaps, creating the home she lost. But for now, it's enough to wake up beside her, to see her smile without that shadow in her eyes. It all started with one simple question in a crowded coffee shop. And now we have a whole life ahead. Together, unbreakable.